Sometimes a research paper will come across my desk and I just think, wow, okay, we need to unpack this one. And this IZA study on AI creativity you sent over is definitely one of them.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. It's goes right to the heart of a question that's on everyone's mind right now. Can AI actually be creative? Is
Right.
that really a thing? And if so, I mean, how does it stack up against us? Good old-fashioned human ingenuity.
Yeah, and what I think is really interesting is that it's not just theoretical. They put it to the test. I mean, they really did with this huge experiment, like over 4,000 people.
Yeah, no, it's a really solid study. I
Yeah.
mean, they had people writing creatively, right? AI doing the same thing, and then they had thousands more judging the results, which is really interesting too, just to get a sense of how AI creativity is perceived by people.
Okay, so let's break this down. The paper is called Creative and Strategic Capabilities of Generative AI. So what does that mean? What are we even talking about here?
So they basically wanted to test whether AI could not only come up with creative ideas, but also if it could understand and respond to, different creative challenges.
Hmm.
They wanted to see how it would handle different prompts and situations.
Okay, and they did that with two main tasks, right? What were those?
Right. So first, they asked both humans and AI to invent something totally new,
Yeah.
an object, something that nobody had ever seen or even thought of before.
So really pushing those creative boundaries, was there any kind of guidance or was it just like a total free-for-all?
It was pretty open-ended. They wanted to see what kind of completely original ideas both humans and AI could come up with.
Interesting. Okay, so level playing field there. What was the second challenge then?
Second one was all about world building. They asked people to describe a futuristic city or society.
Ooh, that's interesting. I can already imagine some of the AI responses, like
Yeah.
some crazy futuristic cities.
Right, and that's what's so cool about this research. It
Hmm.
wasn't just about whether AI could generate language, but about the quality and the originality of the ideas themselves.
Okay, so tell me, how did the AI do? I'm guessing they used ChatGPT, right?
Yeah, so they actually used two different AIs, ChatGPT-4 and Bard. They're both really good at processing language.
So it's like AI versus AI, which one was better?
Well, ChatGPT-4 blew it out of the water. It consistently got the highest creativity scores from the judges.
Wow, hold on. So
Mm.
you're saying the AI beat out thousands of humans in a creativity contest. What were the judges even looking for?
Basically, they were looking at originality, how impactful the ideas were, and how well they actually addressed the challenge. And what's really wild is that ChatGPT-4's responses weren't just slightly better than the average human, they were often in the top 10% of all responses.
Wow, that's really something. What about Bard then? Did it do okay?
Bard was more middle of the pack, like it was about the same as the average human. Not bad,
Hmm.
but it definitely wasn't hitting those same creative heights as ChatGPT-4.
So even within AI, there are different levels of creativity. That's fascinating. But how do you even measure that? I mean, what makes one AI idea more creative than another?
Well, this is where it gets even cooler. They actually used machine learning to analyze all the responses. And they were able to group similar ideas together into these like clusters.
Okay, so like if a bunch of people and the AI all wrote about flying cars, that would be one cluster.
Exactly. And what they found was that ChatGPT-4 was really good at coming up with a wide range of ideas like humans. But when it came to those truly new, groundbreaking ideas, humans still had the edge.
Interesting. So there's still something special about that human spark, I guess, at least for now. But I'm curious about this whole machine learning thing. How can you teach a computer to judge creativity? That seems so subjective.
It is subjective, right? Which is what makes this research so interesting. They basically trained the computer to look for patterns in the language. These metaphors, how original the concepts were, things like that.
Wow. Yeah, it really makes you think about where this is all headed.
Hmm.
But before I go too far down that road, there was that gender twist you mentioned earlier about the study. I wanted to circle back to that because that really caught my attention. What was
Mhm.
that all about?
Yeah, so this was actually a total accident. They weren't even looking for this, but it's super interesting. Basically, they found that when people knew they were competing against AI, the women's creativity scores went down a little bit, but the men's scores stayed pretty much the same.
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting finding. Do they have any idea about why that might be?
They didn't really dig into the reasons for it in this study,
Hmm.
but it definitely raises some big questions about how men and women might see AI differently, especially in creative fields.
Yeah, like are women subconsciously feeling more pressure when they think they're going up against AI, or is it something else entirely? I mean, it definitely seems like something worth exploring further.
It really does. And it gets to something really important about all this. We can't just look at the technology itself. We also have to think about the social and cultural side of AI, too. how it affects people in different ways.
Right, exactly. Okay, so going back to the study for a second, I'm curious about how much the judges knew. Did they know which responses were from AI? And if so, did that affect how they judged things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it turns out it totally did.
Yeah.
When the judges knew a response was from AI, they tended to rate it as lie creative, even if it was actually a really good idea.
Wow, so we're already biased against AI even before we really understand how it works. Like we're almost hardwired to think human creativity is better, even when it's not.
It's true. And it makes you wonder if we're going to be able to give AI a fair shot as it gets better at these things.
Yeah.
You know, like how do we evaluate something fairly when we're already suspicious of it?
Right, and that's something we're going to have to figure out because, like you said, AI is only getting better, so how do we make sure it's being judged fairly? Okay, but let's talk about the other big part of this study, strategic thinking. We've talked a lot about creativity, but what about AI's ability to strategize and make decisions? How do they measure that?
Okay, so this is where the rock, paper, scissors experiment comes in.
Huh?
And yes, they really did this. They had humans and ChatGPT-4 both playing rock, paper, scissors against a computer.
Okay, hold on. Rock, paper, scissors. I mean, that's a classic game.
But
Like, how do you make that scientific?
So they actually had two different versions of the game. In the first one, the computer played totally randomly. But in the second one, the computer had a pattern. It would never choose scissors.
Oh, so it wasn't really random. Then the idea was to see if the AI and the humans could figure out the pattern and use it to their advantage. Did it work? Were they able to adapt?
Yeah, so both ChatGPT-4 and the humans were able to change their strategies a little bit, like they figured out something was off with that second computer and started playing differently.
Okay, but who was better at it? Did ChatGPT-4 have some kind of advantage because it could process all that data so quickly?
It's funny you should say that because actually, no. The humans were way better at figuring out that never chooses scissors pattern and using it to win more points.
Wow, really? So even with all its data crunching power, the AI got out-strategized by us regular humans. What does that tell us?
It might mean that there are some things about human intuition or gut feelings that AI hasn't quite cracked yet. Like maybe we're using some subconscious cues or something that the AI just isn't picking up on.
Right, so when it comes to things like intuition and just reading a situation, humans still have the upper hand, at least for now.
For now, yeah. And I think it reminds us that AI is powerful, but it's not perfect. There are still things we can do that it can't. And maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, it really makes you think about all the things that humans are still good at, you know? Like we have these strengths that AI hasn't quite figured out yet.
Totally. It's like AI is pushing us to keep evolving, to get better at the things that make us unique.
Yeah, like we have to step up our game both creatively and strategically.
Exactly. It's
Right.
about recognizing what we bring to the table as humans. Critical thinking, emotional intelligence, that kind of stuff.
So where do you think this leaves us then? What's the big takeaway from all this research?
If I had to sum it up, I'd say this study shows us that AI is capable of some pretty amazing things, especially models like ChatGPT-4. But it's not about AI taking over the world or anything like that.
Yeah, it's more complicated than that. It's like we're figuring out how to work together, almost like a dance between humans and AI, each with our own strengths.
That's a great way to put it. And I think the key is going to be how well we adapt and learn how to use these new AI tools to our advantage.
So instead of being afraid of AI, we should be looking for ways to collaborate with it, to boost our own creativity and come up with things we never could have imagined on our own.
Totally. Imagine if you had a brainstorming partner that could process information at lightning speed and throw out a million ideas in a second. That's the potential here.
It's like having a superpower. But we have to remember that AI is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
Exactly. We can't just blindly trust the output. We have to be critical to think for ourselves and make sure it's aligned with our values.
So again, it comes back to those human strengths, judgment, intuition, experience. That stuff is going to be more important than ever.
Totally agree. It's an exciting time to be alive. But it's up to us to make sure we're steering the ship in the right direction.
Well said. This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener. I'm definitely looking at AI in a whole new light now.
Me too. It's a conversation that's only going to get bigger and more important from here on out.
Absolutely. And as always, we'll be here to keep exploring these big questions right here on The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us for this awesome journey into the world of AI and creativity.